All right, so we are going to finally start economics. And hopefully, you guys are working on your economics terms. Um, this is going to be a little bit challenging just because we are going to have to do some graphs and charts that I usually would use the whiteboard quite a bit for. That'll more or less be in our second lecture, but at the same time, I think we can make it work, but we will see. Economics is kind of a fun study. I always enjoy getting into it. And when you're talking about economics, it really comes down to the science of choices. And so the definition of economics is as follows: the science of how and why people make the choices that they do. And it really is talking about choices. Most people would never think about economics as choices, they think about economics as just money. But it really comes down to why and how people do make the choices that they do. And so we would say that it is similar to a science. And I'm not a big science guy, although I think maybe teaching psychology makes me a little bit of a scientist. Maybe not like a crazy mad scientist, but it is similar to a science because you make observations. Think about your science fair project. You'd make an observation. You're making some type of theory or hypothesis, and then what you're going to do from there is you're going to maybe predict the future. So the first thing that, as far as economics, is you make observations. You use those observations to predict the future. Let me give you an example of that. You make an observation that it is going to be, you're going to get some really bad weather in the winter time, and so therefore people kind of stock up on stuff. So you make an observation, bad weather, people stock up on stuff. So you use those observations to predict the future. So you predict that people are going to make a run on certain products at the grocery store, so you pick up more. This whole pandemic thing that is happening has a lot to do with economics. Because when people start seeing people take things off the shelf, they are worried about the future and they try to predict their own future, that if I don't get this now, I might not possibly get the good. So therefore, they use that observation to predict the future, and then they attempt to control those future events. And so what you're doing is you control those future events by maybe buying and selling or investing or trading or whatever it could be. But economics is similar to a science in that you make observations, use those observations to predict the future, and you attempt to control future events. Now, why do we make the choices that we do? Well, you guys are like, this seems very elementary. It kind of is, but you just have to make decisions because every day when you get up, you are making certain types of decisions. And the decisions that you make could be Lucky Charms or Captain Crunch peanut butter style, which, if it was me, I'm going Captain Crunch peanut butter every time. Not that I have anything against Lucky Charms. Those little marshmallows are really, really good. But definitely peanut butter, Captain Crunch. But you make decisions, and they're just simply necessary. You have to make a decision. And if you're thinking, thoroughly on this, you would say that even you not making a decision is you, making a decision. And so this is why we make the choices that we do. To make the decisions because they are necessary. So everyone faces, in these decisions, going back to this, why do we make the choices we do? Everyone faces a predicament, and some economists call this a contradiction that we cannot solve. And the contradiction is based on one thing called insatiability. You see the word satiate there, which means satisfy. And it's the fact that everyone has unlimited wants. It's like when you get a little taste of something, you want more and more and more and more. And so this is why when somebody, wins some money, they keep gambling. They want to keep getting more. When somebody all of a sudden starts getting, they start getting certain goods and they kind of want more and more. And everyone has unlimited wants, but everything has a limited quantity. The biggest thing that has a limited quantity would be your money supply. Most people, most average Americans, cannot go and pick up everything that they want at the grocery store because, well, everything has a limited quantity. Everything has a scarcity. And so this is why, like, when you go to a certain place, they say limit one per item because they don't want it to go out. But everyone has unlimited wants. You saw this again with this pandemic, people growing and getting, you know, 10 large rolls or packages of Sam's Club toilet paper. Nobody needs that much toilet. That would be enough for an average family for a half a year. But nobody needs that. But everybody has unlimited wants, but everybody has limited quantity. Could be storage space, could be money itself. But this is the contradiction or the predicament that every person faces when it comes to economics. Next, let's talk about economic cost. The more desirable and scarce a good or service is, the higher the economic cost is. Now, what we're going to do is go into talking about what the difference is between a good and a service. So let me ask you this, and you can hit the pause button and answer it out loud to the people who are watching you watch this video. But what is a good? Giving you time. Okay, some of your answers are bad. I'll admit that. What about a service? What do you think a service is? Okay, yeah, those are decent answers, so I appreciate you guys and your feedback. A good is any tangible thing that has a measured lifespan. This could be, tangible means you can touch it, you can feel it. That would be like an ink pen. It would be food. Food could be a good. Toilet paper could be a good. Pop, peanut butter, shoes, clothes, water bottles. Those are any tangible thing. You might want to write some of those things down, but it has a measured lifespan. Eventually your shoes will be worn out. Eventually, you guys start the school year and you wear your really nice shoes on day one, and then by, well, if we wouldn't have had this pandemic maybe, but by the end of school, your shoes are pretty worn out. And they're just because they are a tangible thing that has a measured lifespan. They can't last for forever. Now, some goods will last for a really long time. I think about this, my computer that I have, you guys have heard me complain about this. It is a tangible thing that has a measured lifespan. It is starting to slow down, and I love my computer. But it has a measured lifespan. It just isn't going to last for forever. But, again, it does have a measured lifespan, and I can touch it. So what would be a service? A service is an intangible thing, meaning you can't touch it. A doctor helping people, a mechanic fixing things, a lawyer working on pieces of legislation or laws for people, going to court systems. And an intangible thing, you guys might be like, well, can't you touch a doctor? Well, you can touch a doctor, but what we're saying is you can't put a price tag on it. A doctor helping your family member who has cancer, you can't put a price tag on that. A mechanic fixing things, knowing how to fix your car, it's intangible. A lawyer working on legislation or laws and guidelines that you don't understand, you can't put a price tag on those things. See, I can put a price tag on my computer and say my computer's worth $1,000. But what if I don't know how to fix anything on my car and I have a friend who would do it for free and all I have to do is pay for the parts? That's worth every penny to me because they're really good at stuff. And so we would say that the more desirable and scarce a good or service is, the higher the economic cost is. The more rare a computer is, the more rare a food item is, the more rare a service is, the higher the economic cost. So imagine if you are the only mechanic in the county, you could charge what you want. Why? Because there's no one else there that can even come close to doing what you're doing. So therefore, you can charge whatever you would like. Goods and services that bear positive costs are economic goods and services. And so what we're saying is that if you are talking about a good and service that gives you joy, brings you positivity, those are called just normal economic goods and services. And so this could be food, it satisfies you. Computer solves issues and allows you to program things and puts data into your computer and save it and make PowerPoint presentations. A doctor helping you, again, those are all very positive economic goods and services. Goods and services with a price tag of 0 are considered free goods or service. You might be like, what would be a free good or service? In most cases, water from your faucet is considered a free good or service. You going outside and taking a breath of fresh air is a free good or service. Other than that, there's not too much out there that has a price tag of 0, and there is hardly anything out there that is considered a free good or service itself. So that takes us to what we would call intrinsic versus subjective value. And so this is an interesting topic. And the question I'm going to ask you is this: diamonds or water? Which one has more value? So I want you to take a minute and I want you to think about this. And I want you to maybe write down your answer someplace on a scrap piece of paper or whatever. And think about that. Which one does have more value? Does water have more value, or do diamonds have more value? Because when you think about it, you're like, well, of course the diamonds have more value because, well, they're worth more. Yeah, at face value it could be. But what sustains life? Water does. So the question becomes, does it depend on your situation? And that's one of the things that an economist named Carl Menger was debating on. And he studied this topic for a long time. And it's not really necessarily a quote-unquote trick question, but what it is comes down to perspective. If you live in the desert, then water is probably going to be more valuable to you. However, let's say that you have water readily available. Then diamonds themselves would be more valuable to you than water would be, because water is readily available. And that leads us to the intrinsic versus subjective value side of things. So we're going to stop there, and we're going to get into intrinsic versus subjective value on our next lecture.